Okay. Um, I hope you are all doing well, whether it's evening, afternoon, or morning in your time zone. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today for different parts of the world. It's a virtual event, so I know many of them joined from the different region, not only from Australia or New Zealand. I hope you guys are joining from the different region as well. We are gathered here for the virtual event. As I said, it's organized by Sydney and Western Sydney Salesforce Developer Group. Thank you for registering and joining us for the today's session. We have two exceptional speakers with us today, none other than the Aditya and Alba Rivas from the Salesforce Advocates, who will be sharing about the innovation and the latest updates from the TDX 23. So, like waste much more time. I'm hand over to you guys. Please go ahead and share your screen and then go ahead your session.
Okay. So let me share my screen and then later I'll hand it to Alba when her section comes up. So all of you are able to see the screen now, right? And hear me.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome everybody to this session where we are going to talk about innovations and updates from TDX 23. I'm sure all of you would have seen a couple of blog posts or updates by everyone else from the community, but we wanted to consolidate all of this and deliver it to you in about an hour or so, along with a few demos along the way. So, today's speakers, we have Alba with us. Alba, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name is Alba Rivas. I'm a developer advocate at Salesforce. I work with Aditya, where really we are in separate teams because I'm mostly based on EMEA and he's on APAC. But we work closely many times, and this is going to be one of the times that we work together. And I'm so glad to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you enjoy the session.
Yep. So my name is Aditya. Maybe I've met some of you when we've come to Sydney or Melbourne during the meet and greet last time, or maybe at the World Tour. So both of us are developer advocates. We pretty much focus on you, that is all the developers, and we want to make sure that you are successful. And before we get started, for because it is TDX updates, most of what we're going to show could be forward looking. So please make all your purchasing decisions based on generally available information and not based on anything that you see today. So with that, we'll start off with the key announcements at TDX. I'm sure all of you already know about what was the biggest thing that we announced at TDX, and it was Einstein GPT. So please put in all of your comments, excitement in the chat. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can't look at the chat right now. But once I'm done presenting, I'll take a look and maybe answer a few questions that you have from the chat. So Einstein GPT, as you've seen on the slide and as you've heard multiple times since we launched it at TDX, is the world's first generative AI for CRM. And how many of you know the full form of GPT? What does it really stand for? Can you put it in the chat, perhaps? Anyone? No, yeah, feel free to Google for that. But it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is quite a mouthful, which is why it's just called GPT. ChatGPT was the pioneer, and we've launched Einstein GPT for all of us in Salesforce to get advantage of the same generative AI capabilities. Now, what is the advantage of using Einstein GPT is it is plugged into all of the customer 360 suite, and you have the benefit of Salesforce trust. So when Einstein GPT surfaced in all of these clouds, let's say it's surfaced in Sales Cloud, you can actually get more information about an account. You can create emails, send it out. In service, it is going to help you generate responses for cases. It can help you summarize case threads, create knowledge articles, and so much more. In terms of marketing, it allows you to create landing pages, it allows you to create emails. And most importantly, for us developers, Einstein GPT can help us write better code as well. So it is pretty much going to be integrated into all of the customer 360 suite that we offer. Now, how does it really work is on this slide. So it all starts with data, because any artificial intelligence tool is only as good as the data that it is trained on. So a lot we train Einstein GPT on your customer data, so that is where it is differentiated from the traditional Chat GPT that all of you know. It is trained on all of the data in the world, but it doesn't have context of the data within your CRM. That is where Einstein GPT is a differentiator for you, where we are going to train Einstein GPT on both the data in your Salesforce org and also publicly available data. So that combined together is what is going to be surfaced in Customer 360. And this training can happen on our own model that we ship, or you can bring your own model that you already have in house, or you can use any of the public models that are available out there. So we pretty much give you the flexibility on what kind of an AI model that you want to train on your customer data. So once that is done, um, it is surfaced in all of these experiences. But the most important part is the human angle. So there is always a human in the loop providing constant feedback, because the whole purpose of AI is to not replace human beings but to help human beings do their work better, which is why there is an explicit feedback that a human should always be providing to the AI. Only then it works. It's not going to take up your role, it's not going to take up your job, it's not going to do things for you, it's only going to help you do things better. So these are the basic slides, and I'm sure all of you are excited to look at a quick demo. So in today's demo, I'm going to show you Einstein GPT working in three areas. One is sales, one is service, one is marketing, and of course, we are going to talk about how you can use it to write code. So that is total four areas in all. So the first thing, we are right now in the sales cloud. As you can see, there is a dashboard and there are a few tasks here. And one of the tasks here says there is an account that has been transferred to me, and the name of the account is Outscape Limited. And as a sales rep, let's say I don't have any idea about what Outscape does. So what I could do is I could click this button. It's going to open up Einstein Assistant on the right hand side. And because it's a GPT framework, you're going to ask questions to it and it's going to come back to you with answers. So I can just type in saying, can you give me an overview of Outscape, and also include recent news. Now what it's going to do is, first thing you notice, is going to open up the account detail page. So if the account is already present, because it is, you've been assigned a task. So it opens up the account detail page, and also it's able to get you all the information from the web along with the information inside CRM, and it's going to draft a nice little response for you. So all of this blah blah blah. But what's important here is it's from the recent news. It's able to see that Outscape is also expanding into the US market. Now the account description is blank. Along with giving an answer to you, what Einstein GPT also does, it gives you contextual actions. So here, because there is a summary of Outscape that Einstein has generated, you could click this button and update the account's description right from here. So the actions are very contextual. Now, because you've seen that it is Outscape is expanding in the US market, you might want to learn more. So you just click this button and it's going to fetch more details. And the details that has fetched this time is the contacts that you can reach out to in order to further your opportunities. And again, in the cards that it has generated, you'll notice that there is one button called View Contact and the other one called Create Contact. So the reason both of these are different is based on information that Einstein has generated. It has figured out that one of these contacts is already there in Salesforce, and it's giving you the option to view that contact. If not, you could always create a contact. Now, because there is already a contact, I want to send an email. So let me click on compose email, and then it's going to take me to the compose email screen. And what it's also going to do is create a draft response that you could use. And as you can see, like I mentioned, there is a human angle at every touch point. So it's only drafted a response for me. It has not sent out this email to the customer. I could always click edit and make the changes that I want and then click send. So what Einstein is doing here is saving me a ton of time in drafting an email and preventing me from going ahead and wasting a lot of time researching about who I have to reach out to, what this account does, and so on and so forth. So this is at a very high level what it can do in sales. Now, in a service use case, I mentioned before that it can help you draft replies whenever a customer is chatting with you. So let's quickly see that in action. So here there is a chat that is going on with a customer. So they're asking for the temperature rating of a K3 Alpine jacket. Now, K3 Alpine jacket happens to be one of the products that we service. So the product information is already stored in Salesforce. So what Einstein is doing here on the right hand side is that it's fetching that information and it's drafting a reply based on whatever the customer has asked. Again, like I mentioned, it's unlike Einstein bot, which automatically sends that response. This only suggests a response. You can always edit it, and it is totally in your control, that is the human being, to send the reply. Now, once this reply is sent, the customer might come back asking a few more questions. So here they're going to a particular location and they're wondering if this jacket is going to be good enough for that location. So again, Einstein is able to give a reply for us, but this reply is again based on the data from both CRM and the public internet. So it's gone to the public internet to figure out what is the temperature at that particular location, and it's matching it to the products inside Salesforce to figure out what is the best product that is going to fit in this temperature range. So all of that is happening in the background. And this is just to showcase that Einstein is able to combine CRM data and public data together. So this way you can keep the conversation going with the responses that Einstein is giving you. But that's not all. Once the chat is done, um, generally what is expected of a service rep is that they summarize whatever has happened in the chat and put it in the case summary. But you need not do it manually. Einstein can do it for you. So the moment you click on close and summarize, it's going to take some time and it's able to put a case summary for you based on everything that you have discussed with the customer. And not just that, because there is some context in this, there is a temperature rating involved, there are locations, there is a lot of important conversation that has happened, which many customers might have. So what it also recommends you is you can create a knowledge article out of this. So all your conversation can be put into a knowledge article right from here so that any other service rep that gets similar questions can point the users directly to the knowledge article instead of having all this conversation. So that is a use case for service. Now, when it comes to marketing, how can it help you? So when it comes to marketing, the use case that we are trying to see here is you want to create a landing page um, for promoting a new product. So ideally, you'll have to go to this drag and drop builder, figure out a lot of stuff, get the copy from your copy editor, get the templates, get images from the web, and put all of it together. But let's see how Einstein AI or Einstein GPT can simplify this process for you. So first, in the Einstein Assistant, I'll type in create a landing page for so and so, and it's going to take some time. It's going to put together a basic landing page. It already knows from the data in your org that you use this footer in all of your web pages. So it's going to add that footer and there is some basic text. Now you could create like a campaign message. So your landing page needs to have text. You put in that, you ask for the message and it's going to draft some copy for you. And you can click on add, and all of this is the builder, so you can go ahead and edit it at any time that you want. You need not rely on what Einstein is creating for you. Now, it's not just text. Like I mentioned, you could also do images. So if you want an image to be put in the banner, you type that, you send it to GPT, and it's going to generate an image. As you know, publicly, there are many other services that are capable of generating images based on text, like DALI and so and so. Einstein GPT is also capable of similar things. And finally, on the landing page, people need not just visit, they can sign up for a newsletter or they can click to be notified about something else as well. So we could add a sign up form. And what this sign up form adds here is a web to lead form. And based on the fields that are present on the lead and based on the fields that are required, because it's the same Salesforce org, Einstein knows that on the lead so and so fields are required. So it's going to add those fields on top of your landing page. So this is a very basic demo of how Einstein GPT can help you create landing pages very quickly. Now, coming to the most interesting use case for all of us, which is writing code, um, very similar to the other AI tools out there, which rely on comments. Einstein GPT relies on comments as well. So, whatever you want Einstein GPT to generate, you type it down in comments, it's going to analyze those comments and then generate the code for you. So for example, we are in the contact controller Apex class. And what I want is to create an Apex method that has a query that returns to me a list of contacts. So I create a comment saying that create a method that returns a list of, and I need not even type it completely. The moment I start typing it, I reach to a point where Einstein is able to analyze what I'm trying to create. It's going to give me a suggestion with so and so information. I just need to click on tab and then that suggestion is accepted. Then I need to maybe limit the query to 10 records and the picture should not be null. Again, as you see, I type in a certain part and the other part is automatically suggested to me. And finally, I can also say that I want this to be invoked from Lightning components. So the moment I type in all of this context inside a comment and click on enter, Einstein is going to take some time and it's going to suggest this code for me. I click on tab and this code is accepted. Now, this is again just a suggestion. You need not go with this code. You can again tweak it. The whole purpose of this is to get you to a point where it saves you some time creating a basic query. After this, you are again free. You can feel free to make changes. Now, this was a class, but what about test classes? Now I've seen many requests come in from the community where every time there is an idea that we ask for on what do you think should be the next new feature that should come to Salesforce, everyone is like, we want to automatically generate test classes. I think this is the closest that will get you there. So again, all you need to do is write a comment saying create tests for, and it's going to again suggest because you just created the contact controller, it knows that it needs a test for that. So you accept that suggestion. Again, it's going to take some time to process this and it's going to come up with a test class for you. Again, this test class is not going to be foolproof. It's not going to cover all your edge cases. It is just a boilerplate code that it is going to generate. You are supposed to look at this code, tweak it, and only then deploy to production. So none of this is going to be like truly production ready, where it generates the code and you push it to production. As a human being in between, you're supposed to look at this and validate it and only then push it to production. So this is what it is capable of. But what we are also working on is a plugin on VS Code that embeds Einstein GPT right inside VS Code. So what you can do here is type a message. So let's say um, you want to know about the latest user mode syntax. So you can type in what is user mode and send it to Einstein. And it's going to come back to you with an answer, just like it does in Salesforce. We have given the same capability inside VS Code as well. So this was a very high level demo of Einstein GPT. It's just so that you are excited about the future, what is going to come in, and how it's going to save you a ton of time. So with that, let's get back to the presentation and see what's new. Einstein GPT for Flow, this is what we announced a week back in World Tour DC. So the same generative AI capabilities that you've seen, where you type in something and it generates a landing page, very similarly, you can type in something and it's going to generate a flow for you as well. So all you need to do is tell Einstein GPT what is the kind of flow that you want, and you can see that flow being built right in front of your eyes. So the demos for this are publicly available. You can find it on Salesforce Plus. So go ahead and take a look. Now, what we also announced at TDX is a Chat GPT integration for Slack. Now, so this is not Einstein GPT. This is like the traditional Chat GPT that has been doing all the waves around the internet. So that has been natively integrated to Slack as an app. So what it allows you to do is do things like summarizing the thread. It can help you draft replies and all of the text generation capabilities that you can think of. ChatGPT has those inside Slack. Of course, you need to have like a OpenAI account. You need to add those tokens and all. There is like a setup process, but then this is an official integration that ChatGPT has given with Slack, and it's still in beta. So you can feel free to go ahead and explore it on your own instances of Slack. Now, the other thing that happens at TDX, along with the keynote, along with a bunch of super sessions, along with all the other sessions that are there, one of the most exciting segments that we've been doing at TDX is what we call True to the Core, where Parker Harris and all the top management, along with the product managers, they sit in a room, and all of the audience, they ask them questions, and without filter, um, they get answers from Salesforce. So these are the core updates of what has been spoken at True to the Core. One of the most important and exciting things is the new Salesforce integration user license. So as all of us know, that it is a best practice to have one integration user per integration, so that you can configure the permissions, the access that that user has for that particular integration in a very granular way. But in order to do that, you had to assign that user a full Salesforce license all this time, which is a little bit expensive. So in the last True to the Core session, there was a request from one of the community members that why not create a license just for integrations. And that is what we have done in like a record time of 3 or 4 months. And we've announced it at TDX, where there is a new Salesforce integration user license, which is an API only user license. So this user won't be able to log in through the UI. They can only log in through the API. And it's a really cheap license. And you get 5 free licenses in all of these editions, like Enterprise, Performance, and Unlimited editions. So 5 free licenses. On top of that, whatever licenses that you want, you can buy for a really nominal price. So this should help you achieve that best practice of having one integration user per integration. So that's one of the most exciting things that has happened. And there were other questions around, I'm sure all of you have heard that Process Builder is being deprecated. Workflow, of course, was in the backseat for quite some time. Now Flow is the only thing that everyone is talking about. So there were questions around, will approval processes be deprecated as well? The clear answer was that there is no intention to deprecate approval processes. And some time ago, there was a communication from Salesforce saying that any App Exchange products need to go through a security review, and that review process is not going to be free, even though it is a free App Exchange product. And now we've gone back on that. Now there is no fee on security reviews for free App Exchange solutions while we work on redefining the policy. So we are working internally. We are going to come up with a new strategy, but until then, security reviews for free apps will remain free. And there were quite a few questions. I'm sure all of you also have them. We, as developer advocates, when we are working on demos, we notice this as well, that there are performance issues in some places. And all of you can be assured that we are working on those performance issues, and we are well aware about it. And to be very transparent with all of you, what we're going to do is in the near future, in the next couple of months, we are going to launch a new blog series where we are going to talk about the current state of Salesforce performance. And in that series, we are going to show you how we are improving that performance over a period of time. And we've already done this with Aura to LWC migration. So theoretically, we've always told you that LWC is much faster than Aura, but you needed proof. So what we've done is, I think a couple of years ago, we launched a blog post where we compared the Dream House sample application that most of you would have worked with on Trailhead projects and so on. So the components on Dreamhouse project were migrated from Aura to LWC, and the performance improvement was documented. And there is a blog post for that. And we intend to do very similar things with all the other areas in Salesforce. So those are a few of the updates that we have from True to the Core. Now, this was about um, the major announcements. But what's new and what's coming in different areas like developer experience, automation, Lightning Web Components, and Apex is what we're going to cover next. And I'm going to hand it over to Alba to cover two of these. And after that, I'll cover the remaining two.
Perfect.
So
Thank you,
that,
Adi. Yeah.
over to you, Alba.
Yeah, there are two questions on the chat, just in case you want to answer them before continue.
Is Einstein GPT making API calls to ChatGPT? Under the hood, what we are doing is a little bit of, we can't reveal what we are doing under the hood yet because it's still fairly new. But Einstein GPT is being trained on your model that is inside Salesforce. So very unlikely we are going to make a call to ChatGPT because that is trained on public data. And we don't want to put your data into the public internet out there. So I'm not really sure what's happening internally, but very unlikely that we might be making so many calls. Will Velocity Flex cards overcome LWC? Um, I haven't worked on Velocity. I know a lot of people are discussing about it. We will plan. We have to learn Velocity first in order to comment on this. So maybe, Alba, if you've worked with Velocity, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, well, I don't think that Velocity is going to overcome Lightning Web Components, because Lightning Web Components is the standard web component technology and framework that we are using and that developers are using, and Velocity is a layer on top of that. I think that Velocity is super useful, and I know like some customers that are delighted with Velocity, and I see a lot of future and improvement in Velocity, but at the same time I see a lot of future and improvements on Lightning Web Components.
Yep,
Hope that.
and Abhilash also mentioned that it is nice that Einstein GPT uses the new assert class and not system.assert. Yes, it's trained on all the new features, and the best part of Einstein GPT generating Apex classes is that it is also trained on your own code base. So, in case you have a test utility method that generates test data, it learns from that, and it doesn't, let's say you're generating a test class, it doesn't generate its own data in its own way. If you already have a way in which most of your test classes are doing it, it's going to try and replicate the same design patterns that you're already using in your Apex classes in your own org. So the most important thing to note is that all of the training happens in the context of your own org. So the model that is trained on your org's data is not going to go ahead and be used in somebody else's org. So everything in your org is specific to your org, and that is how we are trying to maintain that trust boundary, so that all of you can relate to the fact that Salesforce has its number one value as trust.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aditya. Great. So after this great introduction to Einstein GPT, we're going to continue talking about developer experience. So, in regards to developer experience, there are three areas in which Salesforce is constantly investing and making improvements, right? So, one of the areas is DevOps Center, our app to manage like all the practices, tools, and philosophy around DevOps, and that are there to help you shorten your application development lifecycle. Second, we have Code Builder, which is our web-based IDE, like VS Code, but on the browser, and that we expect in the future to replace the developer console, right? And also the CLI. For the CLI, we're making great improvements, and we've released a new version of the CLI that allows you to type commands in any order and with spaces instead of columns, which is like much more developer friendly, and we call that the taxonomy free CLI. So DevOps Center. We're going to see a demo about DevOps Center in a second. This is an app that helps you manage all the different stages that you need to go through when you're creating features in your org, and when you are like moving those features through all the different environments in your pipeline, right? So in the past, the way to do that was change sets. Developers know how to do this, like with the Salesforce CLI, like pulling the code, making changes, pushing the code, right? Using source control, adding source control into the mix. But DevOps Center simplifies all this so that an administrator, for instance, who needs to make declarative changes in the org, doesn't need to understand much about what's going on behind the scenes, and can move changes between environments seamlessly, and so that a developer can interact with that administrator, having like a mixed flow in which both administrators and I'm going to say low code builders, not administrators, and code builders are interacting and collaborating together. Okay, we're going to see that this is super cool. There is a page that the DevOps Center team is maintaining called, you can go to sfdc.co/DevOps roadmap. And if you go there, you're going to see the live roadmap of what they are working on. Indeed, we're going to open it and we are going to see what it has right now. Okay, so here you can see like all the features that the team is researching, working on, and what they have already shipped. Okay, so in the first release of DevOps Center, only GitHub is supported as the version control system that stores your code behind the scenes. But for instance, you can see here that we are working on the Bitbucket integration. We are working on hybrid flows to provide more tools for developers so that they can promote changes with the Salesforce CLI. And we are researching many more features. So I recommend you, if you have questions about what's coming, what's supported, to go there to the roadmap and take a look at what they are doing now. So then, second, we have Salesforce Code Builder. Salesforce Code Builder is our web-based IDE. This is in beta, and we're working hard to make it move to GA, to make it generally available. Having Code Builder in the browser is exactly the same as having VS Code installed in your local machine, with the difference that you don't need to worry about installing the extensions and configuring anything, because everything comes already pre-configured for you. With Code Builder, we're going to be able to just from the org, click on the button and spin up a Code Builder instance in a way that's more similar to what you were able to do with Developer Console in the past, right? And this is going to enable developer productivity. And third, these innovations about the Salesforce CLI that I mentioned are great, because now you can write commands in any order. So for instance, if before you had to write sfdx force colon or colon create, now any possible combination of these keywords works the same. Okay. Also, you probably know that there is an SF executable in that Salesforce CLI and an SFDX executable. We decided to create the SF executable because we wanted to continue evolving the CLI without disrupting the current behavior of the SFDX one, and without like breaking the integrations that customers have with that CLI. But now what we are doing is to move all the work, all the innovations that we apply to the SF executable to the SFDX one, so that you have like the most modern tools both in the SF executable and the SFDX one. That's why everything that you see here, it's also available in SF, and you don't need to migrate to SF at this point, because everything that we are applying, we're moving it also to SFDX so that it's seamless for you. Okay, so let's take a look at the demo. Let me go to, oh no, security update. Let me see if I can defer this. Amazing. Okay, so here I am in DevOps Center. Okay, I have connected DevOps Center to an org, which is supposed to be my production org, in which I have Greenhouse deployed. If we take a look at my pipeline, when it loads, let's see if I can go into environments better. Yeah, so here we're going to see all the different orgs to which my DevOps Center is connected. So here at the right, I have my production environment. From the production environment, I created a staging environment, an integration environment, and also two development environments, which are developer sandboxes, okay? And I defined this pipeline myself because it is the one that my company, my fictitious company, is going to use. But you can define whichever pipeline you're using, okay? So this pipeline is defined, is activated, and that means that from now on, every time that I want to develop a new feature, I'm going to do it in one of these development environments, and I'm going to use DevOps Center to move those changes through the different stages of the pipeline, okay? So what would be the way of creating new features? You come here to work items and you say, I want to create a new work item. So this is what I have developed, deployed, sorry, my production org is Greenhouse. So imagine that this is like your customer or the org that you normally work on, right? And we're going to develop something. We are going to change, for instance, the property Explorer page layout. Here I can add like some more details. I can assign the work item to a developer. And there it is. Okay, I have my work item with status is new. So let's say that now I'm the low code builder person. Okay, if I'm the low code builder person, I'm going to select this option, which is I want to develop and commit my changes from DevOps Center using a connected development environment. If I was a developer, I'm going to select probably the second option, because the second option means that I'm going to handle all the development myself, like committing my changes to GitHub. I'm going to do everything like outside of DevOps Center, but DevOps Center is going to detect those changes that I make, and it's going to update the status of the work item every time that I'm like committing something or I'm moving that change to a different environment. But let's demo the low code builder workflow. Okay, so if I want to use a development environment, I can pick the one that I want to use. Okay, I think. Okay, I have a problem here because I changed the name of the repo. So let's do something. I'm going to change the name of the repo again to see if this is fixed. Okay. And this is Greenhouse DevOps. Sorry, this is because I wanted to reuse the repo for something else. And I changed it like 2 days ago and I didn't test it. I'm so sorry. Let me see if it works by renaming the repo again. And let me go back to DevOps Center and refresh this just in case. Okay. Now it's doing something. Great. So what happened is that behind the scenes, DevOps Center created a new branch in the GitHub repo that I'm connected to. You haven't seen how I connected that GitHub repo, but that is something that I did at the very beginning when I set up this project. So here I'm able to launch that environment and to do some changes. So I said that I'm going to modify the property explorer page. So I'm going to that page. I'm going to open it on App Builder. Sorry, my internet connection is a little slow today. Okay. And we're going to change something. For instance, I don't know, we're going to move the filters here. Okay, save. And that's it. So here in DevOps Center, now what's going to happen is that if I click here on pull changes, DevOps Center is going to use source tracking to detect if something changed in my development environment. And we can see, well, there are some changes that I didn't make, but because this is something because I'm using a demo or it's not a real production or, but the page that I changed is being identified as something that changed in my org. So from here, I can say, okay, I want to pick this change and I want to save it. I want to commit it to my repository. So here, for instance, I'm going to say property explorer page filters position changed. So I'm going to commit those changes. And here I'm able to open the branch in GitHub and take a look at everything that's happening. In this flow, the one for the low-code developer, I'm not doing anything directly into GitHub. But if I was the developer, I would be probably changing things directly in GitHub and committing changes directly in GitHub. Okay. So once I have pushed this to GitHub, it says to me that the commit has been complete. The next step would be to create a review. A review is a pull request, really. If you are familiar with DevOps, with GitHub, you will know what a pull request is. It's just a request to merge the changes that you are doing in one branch into another branch. And you see here that DevOps Center created a pull request to merge my work item branch into the integration branch. The integration branch is the one that represents the code that is deployed into the next stage, which is integration. So once the pull request has been reviewed, I can say here that this is ready to promote. And then once that happened, this, like my work here finished, and I must go to my pipeline. And from now on, I can promote that change that I made in my development environment to the next stages. So for instance, here I can say I want to promote this item to my integration stage. And that means that DevOps Center is going to merge that pull request and also deploy those changes to my integration environment, the one that I have connected here. Okay, now it's promoting that. And look that I have a lot of visibility of what's happening in my whole pipeline because I'm able to see where all my features are. For instance, last week I developed this feature and I moved this feature to the integration branch. I know that is there. The person, the release manager, can come here and take a look at everything, where things are at, and if there are any problems, right? Indeed, when we finalize the promotion, we're going to the environments tab. Okay. And we're going to see that here I have some more information. I have, it's telling me, DevOps Center, that my developer environment one is up to date because it's in the last one that I have deployed. I can see that in the integration environment, I have version one of my app, of my org, really, plus 4 work items. And I can also see that developer 2 environment is not in sync. Indeed, I have even more details here because I can take a look and see what's different from this environment and integration. And I can see that it is different because I just deployed a work item from integration that was developed on a different development environment. And indeed, something that I can do is to sync, and I can bring that information from integration to the development environment too. So as you can see, it's like super agile to develop with DevOps Center and to make changes to DevOps Center, and it gives you like a lot of observability of what's happening in your whole development lifecycle. Right? So said that, I'm going to continue with the innovations, and we're going to continue talking about DevOps Center. Lightning Web Components. If you have any questions about DevOps Center or any of the development experience topics that I touched on, please ask them into the chat, okay? I'm monitoring that. So Lightning Web Components. For Lightning Web Components, there are also many innovations. I recommend you to take a look at the summer release notes because the Lightning Web Components section is huge. You're going to see a lot of new things there. One of the coolest thing is our new GraphQL API. So GraphQL is a specification for building an API server and also for a query language that you use to bring data, to bring records from that API server. So we built a GraphQL API server in Salesforce. We exposed that through an API endpoint. And now we are working on creating a wire adapter that is going to allow you to execute queries towards that endpoint from Lightning Web Components directly without having to write any Apex code or without having to hit any API endpoint, just by using a wire adapter. This is a game changer for Lightning Web Components developers because with GraphQL, you have a single endpoint, and it's totally up to the front-end developer to determine the shape that the query is going to have. This is, the front-end developer has full control of which tables, which objects we query, which fields we query, and something else. We can like combine many queries in one, reducing the number of needed round trips to the minimum. If you think about it, so this spec was created by Facebook in 2015, and they created this because, when you take a look at your Facebook feed, you need to aggregate a lot of data, right? Because you need to see the stories from your friends, you need to see the pictures that they are uploading, etc., etc. And they wanted an optimized protocol to retrieve all that information in a very efficient way. And that's why they created GraphQL. GraphQL has become very popular in the third-party developer community. So all third-party developers, front-end developers, and web developers know what GraphQL is. And we are bringing all that innovation into the Salesforce platform. Okay. Something also really cool is the Refresh View API. This was a very much requested features by the community. And we've worked on that. And it was kind of the same as the first Refresh View API that we had in Aura, but in a much more improved way because it is scoped. So you can define which components refresh and which components don't. And it's not really, it doesn't really refresh the whole component, but it synchronizes the data. So it's really efficient, right? And we are working also in supporting refreshed for standard components. There is recipe that has been added to LWC recipes, in which you can check out an implementation of the refresh view API. Okay, I think Aditya or Satya created this recipe. Let's take a look if you want to know more about that. And finally, something that we're releasing in summer is the support of third-party web components within Lightning Web Components. So what's going to happen is that you are going to be able to create custom web components with any UI framework and move all those components into Salesforce so that they can interact with your Lightning Web Components, and so that you can use any technology or your choice to build them. Okay, so this is something that's part of the summer release, and I know that Aditya is currently working on a recipe for Lightning Web Components recipes at the moment. I recommend you to watch the release readiness live stream, which is happening on May 19th, in which we will be talking more and demoing more this feature. This is the picture of everything that's being released. You see what I told you in the summer release. We have lots of innovations and many features that are making it to GA, which is cool because this means that you can use them safely in your projects. And we have some betas and pilots that are also really cool. I'm going to show you a demo about GraphQL, and with that, I will finish and give the control again to my colleague Aditya. So this is an example GraphQL API. Okay, with GraphQL, you have a top-level field called UI API. There are really two. You can use the UI API and the rate limits one. Rate limits is for querying about limits, and UI API is for querying records or object information. So next, you specify if you want to query records by using the query keyword, or if you want to request object information. The object information, you need to write the object infos keyword, okay? And next, you need to specify the structure of the data that you want to be returned. So for instance, if in SQL you write select ID, name, and country from conference, in GraphQL, you could write, I want to retrieve from conference all its nodes, and we use this syntax because we adopted a specification called relay cursor connections, and we adopted that specification in order to do pagination in an efficient way as well. And then you specify the names of the fields that you want to retrieve. Each field has a type, and depending of the type, so for instance, this is a string field, this is a string field, but there are like currency fields, pick list fields. So depending on the type, there are certain properties that you can request. So for instance, for string, you would be normally requesting its value, but for currency fields, you may want to request its display value or its format, okay? And this is all documented. So to create a query, this is something, so this is the query that you would need to create and type in your Lightning Web component. Here I'm using an API client, and you would need to post that query in the body of an HTTP request to this endpoint. In GraphQL, we have a single endpoint, and we always pass the query into the HTTP request body. Okay, so let's send that request. So let's say that I want to create a new query, and I don't know which S objects are available. Something really cool about GraphQL is that it has introspection capabilities. So here in the client, we can click on docs and take a look at all the different S objects that are available in the UI API family. So for instance, we can click here and see which objects do I have deployed in my organization. And if you add a new object, this documentation is going to be auto-generated, and this is really helpful for becoming a much more productive developer, and also helpful to develop developer tooling on top of this, right? I can foresee many tools being created around everything that you can do with GraphQL. So there are many things that you can do with GraphQL. So here I have some examples. I have a 1 hour talk in the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel that you can watch, but I will show you some of them. Here we are like filtering by direction, so you are aware close here. Here we are querying parent information. So what we do is to indicate the parent relationship name and then the fields from that parent object that we want to retrieve. And something cool is that we have standard capabilities. For instance, we can query for object infos and say, I want to bring the object information from conference, but here I could be using also another object to, like, as I told you, comply with that principle of being as much efficient as possible. We can implement pagination, and we can even query multiple unrelated objects. So for instance, here we are querying for all conferences and all talks, and we are doing that in a single server round trip. So that's super efficient. If we take a look at an example of how to do that from a Lightning Web Component, it's super easy, because the only thing that you need to do is to import the GraphQL wire adapter from Lightning UI GraphQL API, and then use wire. We use wire because the GraphQL wire adapter behind the scenes stores the data in the Lightning data service. That means that all the caching and synchronization capabilities that are available for other wire adapters are available for this wire adapter too. It's going to be synchronized with the data that you bring with get record, or the data that you bring with get related list, for instance. And then you pass a parameter, which is the query that you want to execute. To write the query, you need to use this function to, I think, I don't know the real reason for that, but I think it's a question of syntax highlighting and the compilation of the code, right? Really, or the execution of the code, right? So that it is able to interpret that this is a GraphQL query. But you have to do it this way, and then you specify the query that could be any of the queries that we saw before. In this example, for instance, what I'm doing is to retrieve conferences with their talks. So what's going to be returned in this case is this structure here. It's going to return me, like, London's Calling has these talks, and then French Stout Streaming has these talks. And then I'm going to be able to iterate or to traverse all those relationships to build my component. And this is the result of what you are seeing. Okay, it's a component in which I'm able to see all the conferences with their talks. And I retrieved everything in Lightning Web Components with GraphQL without having to use Apex or SQL at all. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the chat and see if there are any questions. Karen is saying LWC really extends the capability of Omni, Flex cards, and Omni scripts. For most use cases, you will be working with Lightning Web Components and Omni Studio Components. Thank you for clarifying that, Karen. And then we have Iftekar asking, what's the code for Aura? I assume that you are asking about GraphQL, the wire adapter. So the GraphQL wire adapter is not available for Aura. It's only available for Lightning Web Components. Okay. And then, okay, maybe you were talking about the Refresh View API, and the Refresh View API is available for Aura. You can use it in Aura, and I think that Lester already shared the link that that points to that in the documentation. Amazing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass the control to Aditya. If you have any more questions, I'm going to be here till the end. Thank you.
All right. So let me share my screen again. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the final two segments of updates. First is on the automation and user management front. And the first update is the new character, which I'm sure all of you would have seen by now. We've launched a new character called Flow, which represents flows. So the character name doesn't have the W, it's just FLO. So with that out of the way, um, one interesting update that we've launched is reactive screen components, and it was in beta starting spring 23, which is a couple of months ago. I'm sure some of you have already tried it out. So the concept of reactive screen components, just like reactivity in LWC, is that the components on a screen, they automatically update if there is any change to the data corresponding to those screens. So that is the concept of reactive screen components. So previously what used to happen is if a component has to react to a change in data, you had to navigate to a next screen, which made your flow very big, having multiple screens. But now you can have all your components on one screen, and one component can listen to the other component for data changes. Now, reactivity is not just limited to screens. In fact, we have a whole roadmap for reactivity. Components was the first part of it, which we launched in spring 23. In summer 23, formulas are also going to be reactive. So in case you have a formula field, you need not go to the next screen for it to be updated. It will get updated on the same screen. Similarly, next we are going to tackle choice selection, and then we are going to tackle display text, and finally we are going to come up with action buttons. So action buttons is really cool because what this allows you to do is you could have a button on the flow, and the moment you click a button, it can launch an auto launched flow in the background and get the results and display it to you on the screen. So that is what we are trying to achieve with action buttons. So to quickly show you how reactive screens work, so all you need to do is enable a checkbox in the process automation settings, saying that you want to opt in to the reactive screens beta. So once that checkbox is enabled, all your flows are going to become reactive by default. So what we have here are two screens. So the first screen shows a bunch of standard components. So here I have a text field, which I'm calling street, and the API name is address text, and other fields very similar to that. Now here I have the address standard component that I've dragged and dropped from input. And what I've done is the value of the street value is the same of that of this field, which is address text. So what I'm doing is I'm binding both of these together. So ideally what happens in a normal flow is that you enter some information of the street here, you click on next, then the value goes into the address text property. And in the next screen, if you have this component, it would automatically show the value. But with reactive screens, the moment you change something on this field, it automatically updates the field over here. Very similar to this, you have visibility as well. So for example, here I have the show details toggle button. The API name is show details, and there is this details section that is conditionally shown if the show details value is true. So again, without reactivity, you had to toggle this box, click on next, and on the next screen, depending on this value, either this section is shown on hidden. So now you can combine all of those different elements onto the same screen. So to look at the UI, so this is the UI for that flow that we have seen. The moment I enter something like first street, notice the change is automatically applied on this component as well. And when I toggle this button, the details are hidden and shown. So potentially you can look at all of your flows and decide how to combine multiple screens together so that there is lesser navigation for the end user. And it's not just between standard components. If you have Lightning Web components inside your flow, you could do the same as well. So here you have the standard text field that is having an API name, and this value is being passed to this Lightning Web component. So display color text is a Lightning Web component that accepts two parameters. One is the color, one is the message. So both are entered on the screen. So the values from the standard components are being passed to Lightning Web components. And in the opposite example, there is a Lightning Web component. You do something in the component and it sends an output to the flow that is being captured into this text field. So all of these, ideally, if you place it on different screens, they would work, but with reactivity on the same screen, they work as well. So let's look at that. So let's say the message is demo. You can see the demo is being shown here. So this is a web component that automatically is showing the changes, which is it's automatically refreshing or reacting to the new data that it is receiving. Now, if I change the color to red, you can see that that change is immediately reflecting as well. On the flip side, this is a Lightning Web component that shows a map with a bunch of locations. So if I'm clicking on a location, the standard component in the flow is receiving that value immediately on the same screen. So this was reactive components. Now the same thing is with reactive formula. So what we have here is another flow, which is a simple interest calculator where you have three fields that taking the principal. Uh, okay. To give me 1 second. I'm not sure why this logged out. But I just refresh. Give me 1 second while I log in again. Okay, sorry about that. So this was the component that I was showing, which is a simple interest calculator with three different fields. And the interest is a formula field that applies a formula. Now, the way it works, again, you can run this flow. And because the formulas are reactive as well, the change is going to be shown to you instantaneously the moment I update any value. So notice that the total interest component over here is being changed based on the values. Now the caveat here is that notice that this is an input field and it is only reactive because it is an input field. But without an input field, if you wanted to show this as a text value, that is not reactive currently, because if you remember from the reactivity roadmap, for the display text to be reactive, it takes some time. So right now there are a few limitations with how reactivity works. So you'll have to pick and choose um, what components you're going to make reactive, what screens, whether all of those are supported or not. So just a little disclaimer over there. Now, the next thing that was launched with flows is the web data integration directly inside a flow. So until now, if you wanted to do an integration, there are multiple point and click options available. or you had to write an Apex class in order to make a call out and get the data back. Now, what we are giving you is the ability to make callouts directly from within a flow. And uh, here is a small demo for that. So this is the API that we are going to hit, which is a books API, where this endpoint returns a list of books. Now, the way you create an integration is the first thing you do is set up a named credential, very similar with Apex as well. If you wanted to integrate using Apex code, you set up a named credential with the authorization and all of those details. Now, the next, when it comes to Flow Builder, you can click on New, click on Action. And what you see here is a new button that lets you create a new HTTP callout. So you select that, give the external service a name. So let's say Books API Demo. You select the name credential, the endpoint and stuff like that. And the moment you go next, you can define the multiple methods or the multiple endpoints that this particular API exposes. For example, there is one endpoint called getBooks endpoint, and it is a get method, and the URL path is /books. So you do this. Optionally, you can even send in query parameters as well. But what you also need to do here is provide a sample response. So back in your endpoint definition, if there is an example of what is a response that this endpoint is going to return, you will have to put that in, because a flow on its own cannot parse a JSON structure. It needs to know what the structure is. It needs to create the necessary wrapper classes in the background for you. And only then you can utilize the response in a parsed manner. So you click on review, and then what it's going to show you is what is the data structure that it has analyzed based on this JSON. And once you're done, you can click on done. And this is going to then create the necessary wrapper classes in the background for you. And that is the first thing that you need to set up. And once you set that up, it's going to be available as an action over here. So whether it is the Books API, book service, there are multiple HTTP callouts that I have integrated already. So you select that, and whatever is the get method that you have defined is going to show up as an action. You give it a name, and what is the result of this action? So as you know, whenever you make a call out to any endpoint, it returns a 200 or a 201 response if it is successful, a 401 response if it is unauthorized, 500 if it is a bad request, and so and so. So by default, what's going to happen is the flow, once you create this web callout, it's going to create an output variable with the name of 2xx, which is it is a successful response. So the moment you invoke this action, you can assign the result of the endpoint to a variable within your flow, which is what I have already created over here. So if you look at this action, it is the same action, but I'm assigning the result to a book's result property within my flow. And that property I'm assigning to a collection, which in turn I'm showing as a drop down in this screen. So you get the point. Instead of writing an Apex class by yourself, you use this point and click to set up what is the endpoint that you want to make a call out to, get the result back and show it within the flow. And the output is going to look something like this. So all of the callouts happen in the background, and you get the results within your flow, which is pretty cool. So that was the second update about flows. And when it comes to user management, from Spring 26 onwards, that is, I think, 2 years down the lane, you will not be able to assign permissions using profiles anymore. We are deprecating that. And permissions can only be assigned using permission sets after Spring 26. So before that, plan your migration strategies accordingly. And here is a quick summary of what you can do with profiles versus permission sets. On the profile, all you can do is put the page layout assignment, login hours, and the default record types, while all the permissions, Apex classes, tab settings are going to move into permission sets. Anyways, it was recommended as a best practice that you'll have to use permission sets over profiles. Now we are trying to kind of enforce that from Spring 26. The other exciting update that's going to come in the near future is metadata groups. So now the purpose of introducing that is today, let's say you wanted to give the user the ability to customize an application. From the profile, you would check the box, customize application, but it would give them access to the entire app and not a subset. Very similar to view setup and configuration. You check that box, users have access to the entire setup. But what if you want to granularly provide access to only a few features within setup? What if you want to provide only a few features within customized application? For example, they should not be able to edit all of the objects. They only should be able to edit a set of objects that you want them to. So that kind of granular access is not possible today using profiles and permission sets, which is where we are going to come up with a few feature called metadata groups, where you create a group of metadata, like it can be an object, assignment rules, applications, and all of that, put them into a group and assign that group to a permission set. So what happens is whenever you assign the customized application permission or something else, it only grants access to the metadata that you have allowed using a metadata group. So that is what is the future that we are aiming for, to provide more granular user access instead of a very high level access to all of the users. And this is going to come soon. And we are also looking for feedback. I'm sure you know the product manager of user access, who is Cheryl, who's been very active in the community. So feel free to reach out to her in order to give feedback. Now the next updates about Apex. So here is a quick roadmap. Spring 23 coming soon, and longer term, there is a lot that is happening in Apex as well, very similar to Lightning Web Components. The release notes for Apex is going to get a little bit larger going forward. So a few updates I'm going to talk about is the user mode database operations and DataWeave in Apex. All the others, there is documentation being launched. You can take a look. When it comes to user mode database operations, so all of us know that Apex runs in system mode and it doesn't enforce CRUD and FLS permissions. And over the course of all of these years, we've launched many ways in which you can do that. One is using the schema methods to get if a field is accessible or not. And then we've come up with the with security enforced clause on SOQL. And we've also come up with the security.strip inaccessible method inside Apex that removes all the fields from a list or an object that the user doesn't have access to. Now, all of that worked fine, but there were a few problems with the with security enforced clause. So the first one is that it didn't respect the restriction rules that we have recently launched. And there are certain edge cases, like the fields that you specify in the where clause are not considered by the with security enforced clause. So there were a few you have noticed. And the answer to that is the new user mode database operations. So all you need to do is, in order to enforce permissions, in order to enforce the user mode, you need to specify the as user clause when you're doing a DML, or whenever you're writing a query, you specify the with user mode as a clause inside your query. And if you want to run it in system mode, it's the same thing, specify it as system. Now, what we do internally when we invoke the as user clause is that Apex actually drops out of system mode. It goes into user mode, executes your query, and it comes back to system mode. So that way, what happens is that all of the permissions, whatever it is in the future, if we come up with new rules, new restriction rules, new sharing rules, whatever it is, since we move out of system mode and go into user mode, all of those are going to be respected, and this solution is going to be future proof. Now, what does that mean? Let's say your class is written without sharing and you write a query that runs in user mode. So that still is going to respect all of your sharing rules, because even though your class is without sharing, the user mode query is going to drop out of system mode, go into user mode, which means CRUD, FLS, sharing rules, all of those are applicable. So that way we are trying to give you a way in which you can properly manage whether you're going to respect the rules or you're not. So that's what is currently GA. You can use it right now. And this is security review approved. So if you have AppExchange products, you can use this today. Now, the future with user mode is a little more exciting, because what we are giving you the ability is, in future, you can optionally specify a permission set which has to be respected. So let's say you're dropping out of system mode, going into user mode. It respects the user permissions. But what if you want to give elevated access just for that one query? What if the user doesn't have access to a contact record, but then contact object? But then when you go into user mode for this particular query, you want to temporarily run the query with access to contacts. So what you could do is create a permission set, give the CRUD and FLS permissions on the contact object, and run the query in user mode along with this permission set attached to it. So maybe it's a little bit complex to understand right now, but we're going to talk about more about it in the future once it rolls out. But just know that we are working more and more on user mode. So in case you're using with security enforced as a clause in your projects, please replace that with user mode. And of course, consider the implications that I've just told you. That is with sharing, without sharing, and user mode. Both don't work hand in hand so much. The next update is about DataWeave in Apex. Again, this is not very new. It was in pilot before, and now from summer 23, it's going to be in beta. So what is DataWeave is, I can show it to you. So DataWeave is a scripting language inside MuleSoft that lets you transform one data format into another. So let's say you have a CSV, you want to transform that into XML or JSON or whatever it is. There is a scripting language that MuleSoft provides. Now, this is quite powerful. And now what we have given you is the ability to use this script within Apex. And in order to do this, you need not be a MuleSoft customer. You need not have a MuleSoft license. This scripting language is kind of free. So you could use the scripting language inside Apex as well. So the way it works is, consider this data input. Here you can see that it's a CSV file. And there is a script that is written using the DataWeave language. Okay, there is a learning curve which we have to actually go through. But just know that it is much more powerful than what you could do in Apex. So if you had to parse the CSV inside Apex, you would have to write a bunch of code, split your string by commas, consider double quotes, single quotes. There is a whole lot of complexity over there. You could avoid that using the scripting language over here, which is again even more powerful. You could do transformations as well. And the output is that you can see on the right hand side. Now, the ability that we are giving you is inside your SFDX project, you'll have to create a new folder called DW, which stands for DataWeave. And whatever is the DataWeave script that you have seen in the UI that I have just shown you, that is exactly going to be the contents of your DWL file. And since it's going to be deployed to Salesforce, you'll have a corresponding metadata file as well. And once you deploy the script to Salesforce, you could use it in your Apex classes. So there is a particular syntax that you'll have to use. If you have used Salesforce functions, this will look very similar, where there is a class and you're trying to create a DataWeave script based on the name that you have loaded into Salesforce. For example, CSV to JSON is a DataWeave script. I'm trying to load that in, and I'm executing that script against a given input. The input here can come in from your web callouts, it can come in from a string, it can come in from a static resource, wherever it is, it doesn't matter. All you're doing is passing the data to the execute method, and you're going to get the result based on whatever the script transforms it into. Now, basic transformation can happen from CSV to JSON, all of that is possible. But the added flexibility that we are giving you inside Salesforce is that you could directly map it to an S object. So for example, here there is a contact. You can actually map it to the fields on the contact object itself. There is a particular syntax for that. So once you do this, what happens is, instead of you having to get the result as a string, deserialize it into an object, you could actually directly get the value as an S object type itself. So try it out. There is documentation available for DataWeave online, pretty much self-explanatory. So you could do that, deploy the scripts to Salesforce, and then use it in your classes and let us know what you think. Because it's in beta, we are always constantly looking for feedback. So let us know. So with that, I think we've reached towards the end of the session. Um, so we are now open to any questions that you may have, and we are almost at time. So we understand if you are not able to stay, but whoever is able to stay, we are here for a few more minutes. We can chat and then we can drop off.
Yeah, that's a great session. Lot of topics you guys covered. It's really appreciated. Um, Guys, anyone have any question? Please feel free to use the chat window.
Okay, so there's a question: how is callout within Flow different from using external services within Flow? Not very different. Um, External services is based on the Open API schema. So the way you create an external service is you actually load that schema. From the schema, it figures out what are the endpoints that are available, what is the request format, response format. All of that is pre-configured, and then that is available to you as an action within the flow. When it comes to HTTP web callers, it's kind of like you using a Postman client. So on Postman, you get to put the URL, you get to send in whatever data you want, and you get the data back from that one particular endpoint. So that is the difference between your external services and web callouts. Open API schema versus directly hitting an endpoint that you already know how it works. Alba has dropped off. So yes, you can reach out to us on Twitter or drop an email with further questions. In fact, there is actually a Slack channel for the ANZ community that you can be a part of, where you can do a two-way interaction. You can ask questions to us. We reach out to the relevant folks within Salesforce and get you the answer. So please join that Slack channel. I will try to see if I can find a link for the invite. But before that, every business analyst is a politician, every lawyer is a salesperson. This time we have a question: what kind of CEO would you prefer? Very interesting conversation. We will read this in our own time and try to come up with answers for this.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you.
Um, yeah, so hopefully, I know the session was a little bit long, like 1.5 hours, because we wanted to cover a lot of updates. But hope this was good use of your time and you found it to be helpful. Most of what we talked about is documented if it is in beta or pilot. Things like Einstein GPT are still very much in its early stage, so you won't find much information online. But stay tuned. Uh, this is just to excite you about the progress that we are making inside Salesforce on the tools that will make your job easier.
Yeah, sure, Aditya. Um, I think I can say thank you, Aditya and Alba, for joining and then giving a lot of informative altogether. I think you both covered most of the innovative parts and roadmaps and updates from the DDX point of view, and including demo for each topics. Hope this helpful to everyone to understand what's a new and changes comes in future. Thank you all joining, and we'll see you in the next session. Thank you again. Cheers.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.